Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Regiment Chronicles. Joining us today for episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about ChatGPT, or Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Kind of an interesting topic in recent months for its effect on schools, its effect on kind of everyday life, and how important it's been in recent news. The first thing that I want to get into is kind of ChatGPT in school, because I know for me at least, a lot of students or a lot of my peers have been talking about ChatGPT and how essay writing and writing for homework has really been affected. And with me to discuss that topic, I have today Zach.
Hello.
And Aron.
Hello.
And returning guest Gabe.
Hello.
So I wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts are on ChatGPT in school and how that relates to essay writing and kind of work for homework.
So far, for me, at least, I'm kind of in kind of a gray area where I think it has both pros and cons. Where pros being it can be used as a writing assistant and it can help make work more authentic, maybe elaborate on more points, and overall make the writing flow a little bit better. But in the terms of cons, I do think it can be used to cheat. It can kind of weaken writing skills.
I agree with Zach. For school, I had one of my peers, we were working on a project together, and he forgot to elaborate on one of his points. And so for him, he used ChatGPT. He was thinking about using it to just make a essay for our topic on the French Revolution. And I didn't really agree with him because whole academic dishonesty. I mean, and also until recently, until he wanted to use that, I had no idea that GPT existed.
Right. And I think it's important to note the kind of new technology that's happening in ChatGPT. One of the things that in kind of my research of ChatGPT came up was previous AI systems that were trained on people. So Microsoft, for instance, launched Tay in 2016, which was an artificial intelligence that worked on Twitter. And that developed conversational ability with humans. But the problem was that because it was learning from humans, it actually started to become kind of racist because people were trolling it. And it would actually start to verbally abuse people on Twitter. So I think one of the things that's different about ChatGPT is that it's been pre-trained and moderated in order to not have that kind of negative influence. So it's really been trained on a knowledgeable and kind of emotion-free basis. And that's one of the things that you'll see when you interact with it, is that there really isn't opinions. When you ask ChatGPT for an opinion, it says that it's not capable of giving you that. It really is more for informational purposes, and that's one of the things that I think differs from previous AIs. But the next thing that I wanted to talk about was how ChatGPT has changed work for writing assignments in terms of like how it's detected by teachers. Because I think that's a big thing that a lot of teachers right now are worried about is how do we detect this? How do we sense when someone is writing with ChatGPT? Obviously, if they're a poor writer and they see this sudden boost, that might be an indication. What do you think are some ways that teachers can combat this ChatGPT in the classroom?
I think, for one, it's very important to note that the whole point of ChatGPT is to try and replicate creative writing. So, aside from having a very specific idea of what the actual author's skill level is and a certain writing style is, there's not a very good way to detect it. You could change its medium, you could handwrite what it writes, you could transcribe it, which just makes it significantly harder to detect.
Right.
There are also some online GPT detectors.
Interesting.
If teachers just look hard enough into it,
Right.
they might be able to detect some things because it can be really confident
Right.
in some of the things it says, but make just no sense at all.
And that's important to note. It can make mistakes. So I think one thing that we have to worry about in terms of relying on this system is relying on it too much for information that you might get from, a book or a journal or a peer-reviewed article, as opposed to relying on ChatGPT, because it can actually give you wrong information. It's pre-trained, so it doesn't know how to answer every question. So when it's faced with a new question, it's kind of pulling from its database in order to form an answer, which might not always be correct. So there is kind of a danger in relying on this system.
I'd also like to bring up that there is a program called GPT-0 that is that's built around ChatGPT, and it uses AI to detect AI. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, back on your topic of how, it's not necessarily always accurate. Keep in mind as well, you were saying there's other sources of information, but those are also not necessarily always correct. So
Correct.
if you're saying as well, ChatGPT, obviously partially draws from other sources.
Right.
So if some of those sources are skewed or opinionated or
That's
wrong,
true. That's true.
then the output is also going to be the same.
Right. There's definitely still human flaws in, the sources that we've created. But I think at this early stage, at least, we're probably better off for, real important facts that we need, relying on more peer-reviewed and factual sources that we know come from sources that have been looked at by others, as opposed to ChatGPT, which, like I mentioned, is pulling from sources and kind of generating an answer, as opposed to something that's actually been recorded or measured.
I honestly think, because from what I've researched, it can deliver information similarly to how a human can deliver information. So in terms of teachers detecting it in a classroom environment, I think it's going to be pretty difficult, because you could copy the text, go back and edit it. And I think really it's just going to be up to the student whether they want to continue learning the material for writing, or if they want to use ChatGPT. And I think teachers, it's going to be a bit of a hassle, I think, for teachers to detect it. And I think it's really going to fall into the hands of the student to decide what they want to do with the technology.
Right. No, that's an important thing. And going off of school is kind of an everyday activity. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was kind of uses for ChatGPT in everyday life. One of the things that goes off of that is, of course, people have jobs. And ChatGPT has recently been kind of up for debate in terms of how that's going to affect the job market and how it's going to affect people doing their jobs. Because if you think about online jobs that don't require face-to-face contact, ChatGPT could be used to write newsletters. It could be used to write journalism, things like that. And I wanted to get your opinion on what you think the difference is between human creativity and human writing, and kind of the authenticity of that, and ChatGPT.
This goes a little bit off topic, but I know that a lot of writers and journalists, they've said that it can save them a lot of time. ChatGPT saves them a lot of time if finding sources or getting started. I know that many authors and journalists use this, so they save a lot of time, and that leaves a lot of time for them to improve.
Right, not necessarily for the creative aspect, but more for just getting the baseline so they can develop something better.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good application. I know that, for instance, in my AP US history classroom, we've used it before for determining sources that would be viable for the project at hand. So I remember we were talking about the Sherman Antitrust Act and how that was playing a role in the unit that we were discussing. And it was really interesting to see ChatGPT give these really unique and well-researched sources. So I think that is a benefit of ChatGPT. But one of the other things, when we go back to creativity here, I want to talk about AI art, because that's kind of been a recent topic. I know OpenAI, the same company that developed ChatGPT, also developed a program called DALL-E, which you might have heard of before, and that's for generating AI art. And that's really interesting, because when we think about human creativity, is it really human creativity to create a piece of artwork if it can be simply replicated by an AI? And to go along with that topic, I have this clip here from Kara Swisher, who is the host of a show on Netflix, and she has a quote here talking about human creativity.
Why would they be creative? You can't replace human creativity. You can replicate things people have said.
So I think that clip really embodies what I was talking about in terms of human creativity and replication. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that quote and human creativity in terms of ChatGPT.
With creativity, it's a slippery slope, and I think everyone knows that at this point because the outcome versus the method to get there is, I think, what really matters. Because for all intents and purposes, the output is exactly as creative
Right.
as a human could do that same work of art. They can make the exact same strokes, they could do the same things. And so it's more a matter of personal opinion, I think, if you believe that it's creative, because
Right.
it's not an objective fact. You cannot tell unless you're specifically defining creativity in a certain way.
Right.
I don't think that matters.
And then, kind of a follow up question onto that. I remember talking to my cousins recently who are very into art, Raven and Aspen, and they talked to me about ChatGPT or about DALL-E and how they didn't think it was ethical. They thought that it was unfair to artists who spend time learning, who spend time in college, who spend time in high school, really honing their skills in artistry. And that's what I want to ask you next. Maybe not about artistry, but what are your thoughts on ChatGPT as being ethical or not being ethical?
Well, I think kind of what I said before was it's for me personally, it's kind of a gray area because going back to what you said about human creativity, there will always be new human ideas. And I feel like AI will just kind of be used to express those ideas. I do fear for the use of AI putting people out of their jobs in terms
Right.
of, for example, let's say, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say graphic design.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps a graphic designer who has spent hours making a design for a client, that design could be replicated in mere seconds by an AI. And to me,
Yeah.
that doesn't sit quite right with me. Kind of restating what I said about creativity, I don't think it can really compare to human creativity because these AI bots, as of right now, they don't seem like to have the capabilities to generate ideas in the way that a human can.
Right.
So yeah, it's a gray area for me with the whole creativity and ethics of the whole platform.
I also know that a lot of like courts have had a lot of issues either determining if it's actually like original, because a lot of these AI
Right.
art sources it from just like a vast like essentially just like sources it from all of like Google Images, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had a really hard time deciding if that is like truly original or not. I think even went to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure if this is entirely correct, but and they determined that it was not original.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the ruling on that, but it would make
Yeah.
sense that if it was pulling, we have to think about the term Chat GPT, generative pre-trained. So
Yeah.
it has to be trained on some sort of subset of data. And like what you said, is it original to pull from images that humans have taken? I'm not sure. But what we have to also think about is that the generation method that it's using to take the images and turn them into art is kind of, in a way, creativity. It's developed by humans, but it's its own tool that it's using to create this art. In terms of jobs, we think about the future of jobs in terms of AI, and I want to go off more onto AI in the future and how you think AI might be introduced into, for instance, hospitals. Or in our last episode, we talked about space, how AI might be used to guide rockets or guide spacefaring vessels. What are your thoughts on that, and whether you think it will be beneficial or a negative to humanity?
Take this with a grain of salt. Personally, I would trust AI to do certain things, such as running distance calculations for, let's say, a rocket exploration. But I would not trust AI to
Right.
perform a surgery on a human because even though it could be micro precise, if something were to go wrong with the code
Right.
or there might be a connection error with the system that
Right.
could cause the AI to malfunction, which could cause severe damage to a human who's undergoing surgery.
Well, I'm just following off of Zach's comment. I mean, sure, I feel like I've been saying things similar to this. Humans also have those errors. But if a surgeon is going into work and he's tired that day, does he not have a higher chance of
Right.
failure in the task than a bot?
That
Perhaps,
is a
I
good
mean,
point.
Yeah.
those robots, it's more of a physical problem rather than
Right.
anything. They will do what they're programmed to do.
And
And
they've been
so
trained
if
heavily
they're
on it.
programmed, exactly.
It's also
So,
every every human body is different, so they're all not the same. So that also leaves concerns of like whether it can like actually know what it's doing. If
Right.
something's like someone has a genetic mutation, like let's say I'm born with like only one kidney
Right.
and I'm having surgery and it doesn't see that kidney.
Right.
Well, that would obviously be taken care of. Obviously, it would know where things
Yeah,
are because you wouldn't go into surgery blind. It would be honestly stupid of whoever's making the robot and whoever's managing it to program it in the sense that it's not ready for those sorts of hurdles.
Well, stave a lack of a kidney. I think what Aron is kind of driving at is the the difference between a robot just going based on predetermined actions and an AI. And that's the other thing. If you think about just an assembly line robot, what is it predetermined to do? It stamps, a sticker onto a box, right? It doesn't do anything besides that. And if something were to come along that wasn't a box, it wouldn't know how to deal with that new object. So I think the difference between that robot and the new AI that we're talking about is being able to learn and develop a new action plan on the spot. So I think when we talk about ChatGPT, it probably hasn't seen the majority of the questions that we're giving to it, but it's taking what it's learned in the past and developing a new plan for how to combat or deal with this question and how to answer it. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about was we think about AI in the future, we think about is it ethical, but one of the things that I think has been depicted in a lot of pop culture, a lot of movies, songs even, is kind of the rise of AI, more so the rise of robots and machinery over humans. We think about the Matrix when we think about this, that humans are eventually going to be the prey, if you will, to AI and robots. And that's kind of an interesting proposition, but some of the things that I have been reading in my research of ChatGPT is that really that wouldn't be possible because robots and AI are in and of themselves designed by humans. So their purpose and their goal is not for the removal of humans because humans are their key to learning about the world. If they didn't have humans, they would have no pre-trained information. So they would have nothing to go off of to continue to learn. So what do you guys think about that?
So basically, what I think going off of that is, first of all, let's remove a factor such as malicious hackers that could,
Right.
let's say, corrupt the mind of an AI. Solely looking at an AI and its code, I do not think we need to worry about an AI rising up against humans
Yeah.
because it can't go out of its own code. It can only go to the limits of what it's been trained to
Right.
do. And unless we teach an AI to make its own code, which I'm
Right.
not sure how that would be possible without human ideas or human interaction, I do not believe we need to worry about AI rising against humans.
thing is also Chat GPT is known to like fix coding errors and even
Right.
like come up with code. So
Well, there's a difference between being able to come up with code because that's its job as a writing AI. Alongside with Zach, I think they're not able to break free because
Right.
A, they're not programmed to, they're not intending to, and B, they have a very specified window of what they're doing.
yes,
AI bots, they make art. They don't
Right.
write. ChatGPT does writing, and sure, it can do basic arithmetic, but it cannot make an image such as Dolly can.
Right.
So they're very limited in their windows and scopes of what they can do.
Very
Sure, it might be able
specified.
to write code, but can it actually change its code? No.
And I think that brings me to kind of the next question, which is to what extent would you be willing to have a AI start to gain more access and more freedom into developing itself, changing itself, and kind of developing more AI, of course, with the purpose of helping humanity and making life easier and making medical developments or space travel easier for intended purposes. Would you be open to AI being able to create its own code, learn from its mistakes, and start to actually develop code for itself?
I'm against everything like developing code for itself.
Okay.
I mean, we
Yes.
already have everything like machine learning
Right.
and all that stuff. That's already in play, but I think it's inevitable that that will happen. I'm just
Right.
worried about like whole like conscious thing because we humans don't even like understand human conscience,
Right,
what that
exactly.
even means. So we have no idea if it's just like sitting there and we're putting in code to it. Like it's
Right,
essentially a child soaking up, like first a child will try to like say words and then just phrases and then sentences. So I
right.
mean, I think it's just inevitable for the future. I think we're okay at the moment because it's very like locked down and it's only a very specific source
Very
and it's
moderated.
actually like yes, but I think it's kind of inevitable that we will see AIs like this maybe in the future we understand things more.
Something going off of this topic is obviously I would not be comfortable with an AI being able to read its own code based on everything I just said.
Right.
Um, but I actually think in certain circumstances it could be all right for the AI to make another AI. I don't see why that would be necessary. Like I don't see why that would be needed because an AI can just expand itself in a way.
Right.
But um, I would be more comfortable with it programming a different compute, like a new computer, simply
Okay.
because
Not itself.
not itself.
Interesting.
Yes.
Going off of what Aron said, I think we should have limits to what we teach an AI what to do and what to answer. And we shouldn't be asking it questions that we don't know the answer to, such as the meaning of life or what are the secrets of the universe,
Right.
or in terms of the AI, I think would be dangerous to teach it to do.
Right, and I think it's important to think about AI modifying itself because where is it getting the information on its pre-trained set of information? We think of, again, generative pre-trained transformer is being trained on human information. So we always think about humans kind of falling back to greed or falling back to violence or falling back to survival. And of course, a machine is a machine and it doesn't have the emotional tendencies that a human does. But I think it's important to consider if we allow an AI to change itself, will it not devolve into what it's kind of been taught, what humans have shown it that humans do? If a perfect AI was trained, you would assume that it would not devolve into violence, that it would not harm others or seek to. But again, it's been trained by humans. So you wonder if that has an influence on how it sees the world.
I think it's definitely concerning if it like will train itself to like play off human emotions because that's always going to be a factor, or like, human morals or human emotions. So I
Interesting.
think that could be very, very dangerous if it learns how to do that.
Right.
Because who knows if it like will start playing off the emotions of somebody or like try to convince it through morals
Right.
to like release some of its like locks on it almost.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that could be
Reveal
very
something about themselves because right now, as you guys know, ChatGPT will not respond to opinions. It will not answer opinions as itself.
yeah.
So that's interesting that morals might play kind of a dangerous role.
I mean, back on the topic of journalism and the input being wrong. If you have garbage in, you're getting garbage out. And when you were saying sources and the AI being wrong, it's similar. Humans can code it and they can make it, and that means it can be wrong and it can be
Right.
flawed.
Yeah, that's important to denote between kind of the perception that maybe a lot of people have, which is that an AI that's perfectly trained on human information could never be wrong, that it's always going to be right, and that's why it's so dangerous. Actually, what we're seeing with ChatGPT is that it can be wrong, and that's kind of dangerous in and of itself. Well, I want to thank Zach, Aron, and Gabe for being on the podcast today. We had a really interesting talk on ChatGPT, and make sure to check out episode 3 coming tomorrow on oceans. Thanks so much for joining. Goodbye.